Please, close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the exact sound of a heavy rotary phone dial spinning back into place, or the incredibly rich smell of roasted coffee beans drifting from the large red grinder at the entrance of your local grocery store. Welcome back to a time when life felt wonderfully different. Today we are taking a journey back to the Hungary of our youth, specifically the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. We are going to explore 20 normal, everyday habits and deeply ingrained cultural rituals that defined our days back then. These are the precious little details that modern generations, growing up with smartphones and instant gratification, will simply never understand. Make sure you stay with me until the very end, because the final memory we will share is perhaps the most touching, and it is guaranteed to bring a warm, nostalgic tear to your eye. Before we dive into our memories, let us reflect on how differently time flowed back in those days. Life in our younger years was not driven by the frantic, breathless rushing that we see everywhere today. Everything took more time, and because it took more time, it held far more value. We waited patiently for almost everything, whether it was a letter in the mail, a new car, or a simple phone call to a loved one. There is a common misconception today that because we lived without modern technology, our lives were somehow poorer or less fulfilling. But you and I know the absolute truth. Our lives were immensely richer in sincerity, in human connection, and in the quiet appreciation of the small things. We did not send quick text messages, we looked each other in the eye. We did not have endless entertainment, so we created our own magic out of thin air and deep friendships. It was an era where patience was a virtue and community was everything. Let us begin with the immense pride and excitement of the school paper and scrap metal drives. If you were a child in those days, you certainly remember the rough, coarse twine slipping through your fingers as you tied up heavy bundles of old newspapers. The school paper collection was not just a chore. It was a fiercely competitive and highly anticipated community event. Weeks in advance, you would politely knock on the doors of your neighbors in the apartment block, asking if they had any spare magazines or cardboard. The distinct smell of old, dusty paper filled the hallways of our buildings. Fathers would drag heavy wooden carts piled high with neatly stacked newspapers. The weigh-in at the schoolyard was a moment of sheer tension, listening to the clanking of the heavy metal scale. We did not do it for money, but for the collective pride of our class, hoping to win a special cake or a weekend trip. The sight of the courtyard filled with mountains of tied paper taught us resourcefulness, the true value of community, and the simple joy of working together towards a shared goal. Let us gently move to the heart of the home, the Sunday kitchen. The weekend had a very specific, undeniable rhythm that always revolved around the careful preparation of the golden chicken soup. This was not a meal you could ever rush or take lightly. The heavy pot sat on the stove for hours, simmering so quietly that you could hear the large wall clock ticking in the hallway. The whole house slowly filled with the rich, comforting aroma of root vegetables, whole peppercorns, and boiling poultry. The true secret was in the slowness, the way the golden rings of fat formed perfectly on the surface of the broth. Grandmothers would sit at the kitchen table, their hands dusted with flour, patiently rolling and cutting the snail-shaped pasta entirely by hand. When noon arrived, the entire family had to be seated at the table together. It was an unspoken, sacred law. Eating together was a deeply respected ritual, a dedicated time to talk about the week and to feel deeply connected. Today, families often eat in a hurry, but back then, the Sunday lunch was an anchor of pure warmth. Do you remember the sticky, incredibly sweet taste of a cold Bambi or Marca soda on a hot summer afternoon? Drinking a soft drink was an absolute treat, a rare moment of pure delight. You would hold the thick, heavy glass bottle in your hand, feeling the condensation dripping down your fingers. The best part was the specific, sharp, popping sound of the metal cap being removed by the shopkeeper. The intensely sweet, slightly artificial orange or grape flavor was unlike anything else in the world, and it instantly coated your mouth with joy. We did not have plastic bottles that we would carelessly throw away. Every single glass bottle had a deposit value, and returning them to the store was a ritual in itself. You can probably still hear the musical clinking sound of empty bottles rattling against each other in the plastic crates at the back of the store. Sharing a bottle of sweet soda with a friend on a dusty street corner was the ultimate symbol of a carefree childhood, a memory that still tastes like pure sunshine. Another unforgettable memory is the sheer excitement of packing up the family car for a summer trip to Lake Balaton. Whether your father drove a loud, rattling Trabant or a boxy Lada, the journey was always an epic adventure. You would pack the car to the absolute brim, fitting tents, folding chairs, and canned food into every available inch of space. Sitting in the back seat, you would sweat against the sticky vinyl upholstery, inhaling the highly distinct smell of the two-stroke engine exhaust. The drive along Road 71 seemed to take forever, but the anticipation kept you wide awake. The very first glimpse of the shimmering pale blue water of the lake through the trees would make your heart skip a beat. We stayed in company resorts or simple campsites, sleeping in canvas tents that smelled of damp earth and summer rain. There were no luxury hotels, just the simple joy of swimming until our lips turned blue, eating sweet corn on the cob and falling asleep entirely exhausted but perfectly happy. Think back to the magical, unforgettable scent of citrus fruits during the harsh winters. Today, supermarkets are overflowing with exotic fruits every single day of the year, but back then, bananas and oranges were rare, precious treasures that only appeared just before the Christmas holidays. Do you remember standing in the freezing cold, wrapped in a thick wool scarf, waiting in a line that stretched all the way down the snow-covered street? The rumor would spread through the neighborhood like wildfire that the local grocery store had received a shipment of oranges. We waited patiently for hours, stomping our boots to keep our feet warm, just to buy our strictly rationed share. When you finally brought that small brown paper bag home, the scent of mandarin orange peel instantly filled the entire apartment, signaling that Christmas was truly near. We savored every single bite, chewing slowly, appreciating the rare sweetness. That simple fruit carried the weight of parental love and the absolute magic of the holidays. Let us talk about the incredible patience required to buy a new car through the state distributor. Young people today can walk into a dealership and drive away the very same afternoon. But for us, buying a car was a deeply profound exercise in waiting. Families would save their money and wait 5, 7, or even 10 long years just to receive that highly anticipated notification letter in the mail. You could not simply choose the exact model or the perfect color you wanted. You took whatever was assigned to you. The day the letter arrived was a true family celebration. You would take the train to the massive distribution center, your heart pounding with excitement. You might have dreamed of a red car, but if a mustard yellow or pale blue one was brought out, you loved it just the same. The smell of the new vinyl seats and fresh engine oil was intoxicating. Driving it home for the first time was an event the whole neighborhood watched, a proud milestone that meant you had finally arrived. Every evening at exactly the same time, the entire nation shared a quiet, unifying ritual. I am talking, of course, about sitting in front of the television to watch the evening bedtime story. You can still hear the charming electronic melody playing as the little animated bear appeared on the screen. Watching him carefully brush his teeth and get ready for bed was the absolute signal that playtime was over. It was incredibly comforting to know that millions of other children across the country were sitting in their pajamas, watching the exact same bear, preparing for sleep. It provided a deep sense of structure and ultimate safety in our lives. Parents relied on this gentle nightly routine to bring quiet to the house. When the bear waved goodbye and the television screen shifted to the adult news program, we knew it was time to turn off the lights. It was a shared cultural heartbeat, a gentle lullaby that bonded an entire generation of children together in sweet dreams. Nothing tasted better after hours of playing outside than a thick slice of fresh bread smeared with rich lard. This was the ultimate afternoon snack, the fuel of our active childhoods. When your stomach started to rumble from running around the neighborhood, you would sprint back to your kitchen. Your mother would cut a massive thick slice of soft white bread, spreading a generous layer of white lard across it. Then came the magical dusting of sweet red paprika, a pinch of salt, and a few crisp rings of purple onion placed carefully on top. You did not sit down to eat it. You grabbed it in your hand and ran right back out to your friends. The juices of the onion and the rich fat would inevitably drip onto your hands, but you did not care at all. It was cheap, it was deeply satisfying, and it gave us the energy to play until the streetlights flickered on. Modern gourmet snacks will never be able to capture the simple, robust perfection of that rustic, homemade treat. Let us remember the unique, vibrant community life inside the concrete apartment blocks. Living in these towering buildings meant that your life was intimately intertwined with the lives of your neighbors. The concrete walls were thin, and you always knew what the family next door was cooking for dinner just by the smell drifting through the air vents. We did not lock our doors out of fear. We constantly walked into each other's homes to borrow a cup of sugar or a single egg. The area beneath the building was a constant playground. Mothers would stand on their small balconies on the 4th or 5th floor, shouting their children's names across the courtyard when dinner was finally ready. If you forgot your keys, your parents would simply drop them down to you in a thick winter sock. There was a profound sense of neighborhood watch, where every adult kept a caring eye on every child. It was a loud, wonderfully chaotic and deeply supportive way of living that made a towering concrete building feel like a true village. We must also take a moment to remember the crisp feel of our school uniforms and the immense pride of wearing the pioneer tie. If you grew up in those decades, you undoubtedly remember the absolute precision required to iron that bright red or blue piece of fabric every single morning. These youth movements were the defining social structure of our childhood. You can probably still hear the sharp, commanding trill of the whistle echoing across the school courtyard during the morning assembly. We wore our uniforms with a deep sense of collective belonging, feeling like we were part of something much larger than ourselves. The absolute highlight of the year was always the summer camp by the lake. The smell of the canvas tents, the strong mosquito repellent, and the wood smoke from the evening campfires are etched deeply into our memories. We learned how to tie knots, how to march in rhythm, and how to sing together under the starry summer sky, forging lifelong bonds. Do you recall the strange, wobbly experience of buying fresh milk in plastic bags? Before sturdy cardboard cartons became the norm, milk was sold in these fragile, pillow-like pouches. Carrying them home in your string bag required a delicate touch, as one wrong move could easily puncture the thin plastic, spilling precious milk all over your groceries. Once safely home, you carefully placed the floppy bag into a specially designed hard plastic pitcher. Then came the precise ritual of snipping off the top corner with a pair of sharp scissors. Often, the rich, thick layer of heavy cream that floated to the top would temporarily clog the small opening when you tried to pour it. The taste of that milk was wonderfully rich, natural, and completely unrefined. It tasted like it truly came from a farm. The tactile memory of squeezing that cold, soft bag and the smell of the fresh cream is something that simply cannot be replicated by opening a modern, sterile plastic bottle. Winter brought with it the deeply traditional, highly communal ritual of the early morning pig slaughter in the countryside. Long before the sun even thought about rising, the village would be awake. The air was freezing cold, your breath hanging in the dark like thick white smoke. The ritual always began with a warming shot of homemade plum brandy, meant to wake up the body and give strength for the long, physically demanding day ahead. The crackling of the open fire and the distinct scent of singed hair and burning straw filled the winter air. It was a massive community effort. Aunts, uncles, and neighbours all worked side by side, their hands greasy and their faces red from the cold. We spent hours cleaning casings, mixing ground meat with heavy amounts of garlic and brilliant red paprika, and carefully stuffing sausages. It was not just about securing food for the long winter. It was a festival of survival, a celebration of family bonds, and a testament to the hard work of our hands. As the warmth of summer slowly faded into autumn, every kitchen turned into a busy, steaming factory for preserving the harvest. The ritual of making jam and pickling vegetables was an essential part of our yearly rhythm. Your mother and grandmother would stand over massive, bubbling pots of sweet apricots or sour cherries. The entire house smelled heavily of sharp vinegar, fresh dill, boiling sugar, and ripe fruit. We, the children, were tasked with thoroughly washing the glass jars, making absolutely sure they were perfectly clean. Pouring the scalding hot jam into the jars and sealing them tight with cellophane and rubber bands felt like trapping a tiny piece of the summer sun. When the work was finally done, the pantry shelves looked like a beautiful glowing mosaic of vibrant reds, yellows, and greens. Opening a jar of that sweet apricot jam in the dead of a freezing January was a beautiful reminder of warmer days and the boundless love of the women who prepared it. Let us turn our minds to the quiet, thrilling secrecy of late nights spent sitting beside the family radio. When the house was completely dark and silent, you would turn the heavy plastic knob, searching for the forbidden frequencies of Radio-Free Europe. The glowing dial illuminated the room with a soft, yellowish light. You had to lean in very close to the speaker, trying to hear the faint music and news through the aggressive, crackling noise of the state jamming signals. It required immense patience and a very delicate touch to tune the receiver just right. Hearing the voice of the distant radio host or catching the rhythm of a banned Western rock song felt incredibly rebellious. It was our only fragile window to a vast, mysterious world outside our borders. That crackling, static noise was the soundtrack of our youthful curiosity. We listened in hushed silence, feeling a profound connection to a broader reality that we were officially not supposed to know. Following the radio, we must remember the pure dedication required to create a mixtape on a cassette recorder. In an era long before instant music streaming, capturing your favorite song was an art form that demanded total concentration. You would sit cross-legged on the carpet for hours, your fingers hovering nervously over the play and record buttons, waiting for the radio DJ to finally play the track you wanted. The frustration was immense when the host started talking over the fading end of the song, ruining your perfect recording. We cherished those cassette tapes like precious jewels. When the tape inevitably unspooled or got eaten by the player, we painstakingly wound it back into place using a simple hexagonal pencil. Giving someone a mixtape that you had carefully recorded and labeled with a blue pen was the ultimate expression of deep friendship or young love. It showed that you had invested your precious time and your whole heart into making something just for them. Do you remember the roaring, thunderous sound of the heavy Icarus buses pulling up to the dusty bus stop? These massive vehicles were the absolute lifeblood of our public transportation. As the bus approached, you could smell the thick, heavy scent of unburned diesel fuel hanging in the air. The folding doors would hiss and slam open violently. If you were lucky, you rushed to stand right in the middle, in the accordion-like joint, trying to keep your balance as the bus turned sharp corners. But the most memorable ritual was punching your own ticket. You had to slide the small slip of paper into the heavy metal box mounted on the handrail and squeeze the black lever with all your might. It made a loud, satisfying mechanical click-clack sound, leaving a unique pattern of holes in the paper. We did not have electronic cards to tap. We had tangible proof of our journey. The rattling windows, the vibrating floorboards, and that clicking sound are memories permanently stamped into our minds. Another unforgettable ritual was eating a freshly fried, incredibly greasy dough at the bustling local market or by the lake. There was absolutely nothing quite like the smell of yeast dough being dropped into a massive pan of sizzling, boiling oil. You would stand in line, watching the vendor expertly stretch the soft dough with their bare hands until it was perfectly round and thin in the middle. When it was handed to you on a thin square of tissue paper, it was still far too hot to hold comfortably. The absolute most important step was rubbing a raw, halved clove of garlic aggressively all over the crispy golden surface. The oil and garlic juices would drip down your wrists as you took your first crunching bite. We stood at high, sticky metal tables, eating it quickly before it got cold, licking the coarse salt off our fingers. It was heavy, utterly unhealthy by today's standards, but it was the most comforting, deeply satisfying street food a child could ever ask for. Let us step inside the heavy doors of the traditional state grocery store. The very first thing that hit you was the overwhelming, magnificent aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans. Right by the entrance stood a massive, red, industrial coffee grinder. Customers would pour their freshly bought beans into the silver funnel, and the whole machine would violently shake and roar, filling the air with coffee dust. Walking further in, you approached the deli counter, where a familiar lady in a crisp white coat stood ready to help. You did not pick pre-packaged meat from a cold shelf. You asked her directly for exactly 10 decagrams of winter salami, and you watched as she sliced it incredibly thin on the loud spinning machine. She knew your mother. She asked about your grades in school, and she always handed you a tiny slice of bologna to eat while you waited. It was a deeply personal, human transaction, filled with familiar faces and a genuine sense of daily community. We must also reflect on the heavy metal reality of using public telephone booths. In a time when very few families had a private phone line in their apartment, making a call meant walking down to the street corner or the post office. You would stand in line, clutching a heavy, specially minted coin with a hole in the middle, waiting patiently for the person inside to finish their conversation. The booth always smelled faintly of old tobacco smoke and damp paper from the torn phone book hanging on a chain. You lifted the heavy black receiver, dropped your coin into the slot, and meticulously spun the mechanical rotary dial. Each number made a satisfying, rhythmic ticking noise as the dial spun back to its starting position. Because every second cost money, you spoke quickly and purposefully. You made every single word count. We did not chat endlessly about nothing. We communicated what was truly in our hearts. Those booths taught us the immense value of a simple conversation. Finally, let us remember the beautiful, fading art of writing real, physical postcards from our summer holidays. When you visited Lake Balaton or went to a pioneer camp, sending greetings back home was an absolutely mandatory ritual. You would stand in front of the spinning wire rack at the newsstand, carefully turning it to find the brightest, most beautiful photograph of the sunset over the water. Then, you would sit at a quiet cafe table, Take out your trusty blue pen and carefully write your thoughts in your very best handwriting. You had limited space, so you only wrote what truly mattered. You wrote about the warm water, the good food, and how much you missed them. You licked the slightly sweet glue on the back of the postage stamp, pressed it down firmly, and dropped the card into the red mailbox. Sending that small piece of cardboard was like sending a tangible piece of your own heart across the country, a physical token of love that your family would keep on their fridge for years. When we look back at all these beautifully simple, everyday habits, we realize a profound truth. We do not just miss the old objects, the crackling radios, or the taste of the warm milk. What we truly, deeply miss is our youth. We miss the feeling of time moving slowly, allowing us to truly experience every single moment. We miss the genuine, unbreakable connection we had with our neighbors, our families, and our friends. We lived in a world that was undoubtedly harder, but it was incredibly rich in human warmth and sincerity. Those decades shaped who we are today, leaving us with memories that modern conveniences can never replace. If this journey brought a warm tear to your eye or made you smile, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video to support us. And now, I want to ask you directly, which of these 20 lost rituals do you miss the absolute most? Please take a moment to write your own personal story in the comments below, because we would absolutely love to read and share in your memories.